This podcast is brought to you with limited interruption by Rudy Luther Toyota. Whether looking for an exciting brand new Toyota, a certified pre-owned vehicle, or getting quality routine maintenance and service for your vehicle, Rudy Luther Toyota is the place to go. Rudy Luther Toyota, the southeast corner of 394 and 169 in Golden Valley. Broadcasting live on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. In the evenings on WCPT 820 Chicago's Progressive Talk, and in the nighttime hours, 1150 AM KKNW in Seattle. It's the Matt McNeil Show on your Tuesday. Good to have you with us. 4 o'clock hour locally here in the Twin Cities. Patrick Coolican from the Minnesota Reformer joins us. But right now, it's our expert in diseases and everything that makes you scared. It's Dr. Joe Eastman, of course. Dr. Joe Eastman with the World Health Network. Of course, he has also got his exceptional newsletter, which I link to all the time. If you're not following it, you definitely need to be now, as Dr. Joe is kind enough to join us to talk all things COVID, bird flu, and just the disaster that's coming our way when it comes to public health. Hi, Dr. Joe.
Good afternoon, Matt. How are we doing?
I'm doing well today. And as a matter of fact, I want to start off. I was at the doctor today. I had just had an annual checkup. And he asked, he said, do you need a flu shot? I said, no, I already got that. I said, do you need a COVID shot? And I said, no, I got that at the same time as the flu shot, but when should I get my next one? He said 6 to 8 months, and that's when it hit me. 6 to 8 months from the last time I got my COVID shot. It's going to be into the Trump administration, and I actually have to ask the question, will there even be a COVID shot for the next time around? Or what's going to happen here? How concerned are you as a man of science, a man of medicine, a man of numbers? You look at these things all the time. How concerned are you about what is coming down the line when you hear things like RFK Jr. and we're going to toss out vaccines? What's your thoughts at this point?
To say I'm a little nervous is an understatement by far. I see so many things coming, not only the vaccines, but talking about a moratorium on research funding for infectious diseases, a complete restructuring of staff. It goes on down the line. So, get your flu shot right now. It's a good time to do it. And also your COVID vaccine, or COVID shot, I should say, because there's just mounting evidence that it is really going to help you out in terms of outcomes and such. But yes, I'm very concerned because of what RFK is saying. One thing though, we do have a kind of a buffer where a lot of this control is in the hands of the states. Now, depending on what state you're in, it might not be as much a concern. I mean, even in Minnesota, we're running COVID and flu shot advertisements I've seen around the last 10 days or so, which is, thank God we live here.
But a place like Oklahoma is probably going to be, I imagine, Mississippi, West Virginia. I imagine they're going to be just little petri dishes waiting for the next big disease to come down the line.
Yeah, especially, Florida, Texas,
wow.
All those states have surgeon generals that are just an absolute joke as a scientist. What they say is quite offensive and is harming people. I don't know if any of these people will ever pay consequences for it, but they should. It's a crime against humanity in some ways.
The Republican tone has always been, and regardless of whatever we're talking about, is don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. That's a really bad mentality when it comes to this because, and I'm not sure if the Trump administration, if they're going to continue this, only they're just going to do it, they're going to privatize it. So as opposed to the federal government running some of these programs, they're going to be privatized. So they'll still exist, but at a massive cost increase. Or whether they'll just get rid of them at all. But when the next major, and we can talk about bird flu, which is probably going to be a much bigger problem here, if the next major outbreak that happens, it feels like trying to solve the problem after the genie's out of the bottle is really a bad way to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at this bird flu response. So when we get into that, I'll give you some more commentary on that. But I'm really concerned right now what we currently have in place to control the outbreaks. You know, over 30% of the California herds are infected right now. Just think of that. That is a big milk supply for this nation. And anyways, what they're doing is they're testing the milk, and this ain't the way to do it. It's kind of after the fact. There's dairy products that are getting into the market, milk, butter. So it is particularly frightening. We need a lot closer monitoring and surveillance. Right now, a rapid test. There's two schools of thought here. A very rapid test for the milk supply, so we can detect this stuff very quickly. A lot of times you got to send it off to labs, and it takes 10 days to get back. And by that time, it's already probably entered the food supply in many ways, which is really concerning to me. And the other thing is, we need to nail it down instantly. I should mention the CDC just contracted with a testing company for an instant avian flu detection in humans, H5N1. So that tells me that they're probably a little more concerned than I thought they were. Whether they're saying things that they're not saying enough to us, but you can watch these little wheels turning around, and they're starting to get very concerned about H5N1.
One final thing on the politics of all this going to happen. I mean, RFK Jr. is a vaccine skeptic. He has tried to soften his tone, saying, well, I'm not going to tell you can't have a vaccine. If you want to get a vaccine, it is. It's just we're going to get rid of mandates on them, and we're going to make schools open their doors to people that are not vaccinated. How long? Obviously we're extrapolating a lot of numbers that we really can't do. How long till this comes back and bites us in the caboose? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? How quickly will all of a sudden we start seeing skyrocketing cases of diseases that we haven't seen fight back like this in 6-7 decades?
Yeah, we're starting to see it already because, this whole anti-vax stuff has gained a little momentum because of the way they handled the COVID vaccines and such, and not getting the proper messaging out. And this is just going to magnify it even further. I am extremely concerned about that. Just things like measles and TB and all this stuff, you're starting to see it pop up all around the world, actually. And I hope we got enough buffers in place to prevent this, but I don't know.
Well, here's the thing, and you would hope that their whole thing is, well, they're convinced vaccines cause autism. I guess one of the things which I'm convinced of is that even if they have evidence that the vaccines did not, cause autism, they're going to still insist that autism was cured because they did this, and they'll walk away. These are people who are such zealots for their cause, they have no problem sacrificing your kids for their beliefs.
Yeah, I know it. I just watched a pretty long little kind of debate between the autism-causing vaccine and this doctor, and boy, she just shredded them. But a lot of times, that's their mantra. Just keep repeating stuff, and eventually people believe it. And that's what's going to go on. Our health institutions have to get out front and hammer this stuff down. But when the Trump administration comes in, that even that's going to be silenced to a large degree. So, yeah, it's a frightening prospect.
Let's go talk about the avian flu here. You mentioned California, and I think the last numbers I saw, 335 herds had been reported, documented as having H5N1 in them. Minnesota's got 9, none in Illinois, but Michigan, Ohio have got cases. Iowa's got cases. None in Washington, but Idaho's got 36 cases. Oregon's got a case as well. This is spreading, and in the realm of the way that we talk about this, as you and I look at this, and remember in 2020, this is spreading and spreading fast. Correct?
Yeah, not necessarily to humans, but we don't even know that really because that's vastly undercounted. And the other thing that is really concerning is the sequencing data we're getting is they can't specify location. That's USDA rules, so to speak. So we don't know where these samples are coming from. As we saw just recently in Cambodia, it made the first mutation to the PB2, the E726K. It happened over there.
And what is that? What does that mean exactly?
It's one of the most crucial steps for it to make the jump of efficient human-to-human transfer.
Oh, good. All right. Okay. Well, I'll just stop talking. I'll let you finish up what you're saying here. I'm just going to get back in the fetal position underneath the desk here. Okay.
Yeah, it's called the polymerase complex protein. But yeah, so we've seen that, and there's indications that the teen infected in British Columbia might have had it, although it's slightly different. It's E726K, I think it was. They need more testing on that naturally. And last I heard, the teen is once healthy, very healthy teen is still in intensive care.
Dear Lord. And thank God there's no airline traffic between Canada, Cambodia, and the United States. It's like thank God that's good. Well, we actually had some cases here where people were getting infected off the herds. Correct? Is that still happening?
Yeah, if you break it down, roughly 60% of the human infections have come from cattle herds and about 40% from poultry.
Okay.
Right now, it appears they're not wearing PPE for one thing. Goggles are just crucial, and it appears most of the cases are coming through the eye and the conjunctivitis pathway, and once it gets in the eye, it spreads into the lungs too. So there's a direct pathway for that to happen.
Well, and great. All right, we'll finish talking about this, and then we'll get into the bright, cheery noise that is COVID. We'll get into that here in just a second. Dr. Joe Eastman, our expert on epidemiology and numbers in regards to this stuff, he's joining us today. We'll take a break. It's the Matt McNeil Show. It is the Matt McNeil Show. Dr. Joe Eastman, kind enough to join us once again and get his newsletter. You'll need to keep that. Trust me, you're not going to get any information from the federal government the next 4 years. So you might as well have someone on your side. And his newsletter is going to be a must-read. Well, it already is a must-read, but it's definitely going to be must-reading here coming up here in the next few months. So one question, going back to avian flu. I mean, you said it's like, okay, PPP, just wearing eye gear, gloves, maybe a mask. I mean, just basic common sense. But yet most farms, most herds, most dairies, whatever the case may be, they're just not doing anything like that?
Yeah. In fact, I have a friend that's pretty high up in the USDA, and he was just telling me that there's just, first of all, the cattle farm owners are not warning their workers well enough. And they're hesitant to wear them because it is uncomfortable. I mean, like I wore an N95 at my last infusion for 8 hours. It's not exactly a comfortable thing, but it's necessary to prevent this. And there's a big hesitancy on this. And he's also expressed that there's 2 new genotypes that have already developed of H5N1 due to the migration, likely. As we got all these birds coming in, think of the United States like broke up into our time zones. Well, the birds kind of take the same kind of paths when they come down from the north, and and the Rockies are kind of one of the barriers, and they're channeling stuff. You can watch it move down. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see the southern states really get hard. You've already seen the Pacific coast and what's going on there. We have had the one swine outbreak in I think it was Oregon, but yeah, once it goes to pigs, that their tissues are very similar to ours. And the thing that's preventing this is there's a couple really hard mutations that have to happen so that first our bodies can't recognize it's there. And that's called the MXA, nucleoprotein. And the other one that's really hard is reshaping these 2 particular protein sites. It's very rare, but as we combine influenza and if we get a co-infection with H5N1, the chances of a reassortment occurring, because influenza already has this stuff and these changes. That is very possible, and that's the most frightening thing. I would say that I don't think it's going to happen this year, but chances are next year getting higher and higher the more we go on and don't contain this better.
I will say this. You, about a year plus ago, when avian flu really started coming back again and we're starting to see it in the herds, you said there were 6 steps that needed to happen, if I remember correctly, 6 steps that had to happen before this was a real threat for human-to-human interaction, and now we're down to 2. And so it's not going in the right direction. As depressing as that is, it sounds like you do actually have some more positive news in regards to COVID, correct?
Yes, I do.
Wow!
Let me give it a little context. What happened is this summer's wave really started late in the year, but what people don't realize, it actually peaked twice, or was at a peak for an extended period of a few weeks. And it was actually bigger than last year's last January. That's how big that wave was. So it was the second biggest ever. It also was spread out over time for so long, and so many people got infected that right now our natural immunity is probably at a pretty high rate right now. So what's happened is we have kind of stalled any of the XEC variant, which I don't think is going to beat KP 3.1.1. I just don't see it happening. Hasn't really taken off. And right now, nationally, we're sitting around 400,000, which should alarm people. 5,000 dead last month from COVID. But we're sitting at a very small rate relatively to what we've been experiencing. And it doesn't look like it's even going to increase much due to the Thanksgiving travel. It will bump up, I guarantee you that, but maybe, about 12 to 15%, something like that. So we might get up to around 500,000. And then it appears, and this is based on my model, I'm talking about the future here, which my model's been very accurate this whole month. What's going to happen is you'll see very slow increase throughout December. And here's the good news. The model says a peak at the beginning of January, actually January 4th, of approximately 700,000 to 800,000 new daily infections. Now compare that to last year when we had about 2.8 million. I think that's somewhat encouraging. But we may be pushing things back so that this spring could be a nightmare. People always want to say it's seasonal. Mm-hmm. It is not seasonal.
It's no, and my doctor today was saying, there likely will be an annual fall shot, but he said I'm not going to be surprised if we have to have two, because you have to have some sort of consensus, and this is still not factoring in potential mutations that could come down of the COVID virus, which once again we've seen that happen multiple times, where all of a sudden something comes back in, and it completely overwhelms the system.
Yeah, there's no candidates on the table right now that I see can really cause some havoc. So I think that's a little bit of good news. I'm not total gloom today, Matt.
Well, how about I change that? I just got an update on my phone. Donald Trump has announced that he's going to put Dr. Oz in charge of the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare.
All right. Can I crawl under my desk?
Yeah, we're back under the desk again. It's going to be, dear Lord. Oh, boy. I just can't wait for those supplements to walk off that broken leg. It's just is going to be a nightmare. But, real quick, we don't have a lot of time here, but real quick. Is the problem here that people just haven't suffered like we used to suffer with these diseases, and that we're so far away from that now that people just don't realize the dangerous dance we're playing by all this?
Yeah, quickly. It takes about 9 months to really manifest in terms of long COVID. We are in a long COVID disease that is, you won't see the death and stuff and the excess deaths until about 9-10 months down the road from each wave. And it's so sad.
The newsletter that Dr. Joe Eastman puts out is, I am dead serious. It's must reading. It's one of my top 3. I highly recommend it. I will put the link up on all the socials a little bit later on. Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook, and on Mastodon. Dr. Joe Eastman, thank you as always. I appreciate your information. We'll take a break, come back. It's the Matt McNeil Show.
If all of the kings had their queens on the throne, we would pop champagne and raise a toast to all of the queens who are fighting alone.
Broadcasting in the evenings on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, in the nighttime hours, 11:50 a.m., KKNW in Seattle, and of course, live in Minneapolis, St. Paul on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. It's the Matt McNeil Show on your Tuesday. Dr. Joe, by the way, he did just text me that he's going to have the full latest update coming up here, full forecast tomorrow on his newsletter. Follow his newsletter. I'm serious. It's like Rupar's newsletter, Sven Sundgaard's weather newsletter, and his newsletter. Those are the ones, boom, those are must reads on this one. Brett, didn't get a chance to say hi here at the beginning of the show. How are we today, my friend?
Hey, doing good over here.
I'm doing well. I mean, enjoy this as it lasts, because today, and I'm just going to stand up so everyone can see on the camera here. Look at that pasty white leg. Oh, it's the last time you see those baby games.
Oh, you're still going the short. I'm impressed in November you're still doing that.
Yeah, look at that. Oh.
That is the most Minnesotan thing ever. I'm wearing shorts in November.
Sandals in November. I got news for you, unless you're lucky. It's the last time you're going to see these pasty white thighs, because it is going to get cold, man, up here.
It looks like it, yeah.
Damn you, Canada, keep that up there. And that, all your niceness and politeness, and the polar bears, too. Keep it all up there. It's going to get cold here, so this is probably the last day I'm going to have shorts until, the way the weather's changing, I'm probably February.
Yeah, late January.
It's Christmas, I'll have them back on again. I'll bring red ones in, so it'll be very festive. This is the last day. I know this is going to be. You got to get into this. I love living in the Seattle. Of course, you get a little bit more temperate there being on the coast, but I love your temperature out there. It's actually quite lovely. Chicago, Minneapolis, what you get is the 4 seasons, and I like the 4 seasons. I do, not just the music. I mean, who doesn't? But I mean, actually having the 4 distinct seasons. Have you ever been to Christmas in Arizona? What a travesty! What a freaking travesty! You painted your windows? So, because people when they look outside and see your cacti are going to think it's snowing. Come on, man. Florida? Come on, stop painting. I get it. Just, I have to have the snow. I have to have a little bit of that. A little bit of the festive nature, the crispness in the air.
Let's hope we get some this year.
Yeah, we didn't last year, did we? Oh. It was a very Missouri Christmas, and I'm endearing myself with the Chicago audience. Hey, Chicago, Illinois. What about Missouri, man? No way.
No one says. I really wish I'd have a Missouri-style Christmas. No offense to Missouri, but it's not the best weather.
The mullet of states. Yes, who doesn't love Missouri? Oh, well, for our folks in Seattle, what's up with Idaho, man? Anyway, I can do this all day. I could do this all day. But I actually have some numbers here. I want to take some time here for this next segment to go over some just realities. Every time a Republican wins the presidency, no matter what the margin, the Republicans come out screaming, "We've got a mandate!" No, they don't. I remember when they did this in 2016, and they were screaming this as they lost the popular vote, but they still insisted they have a mandate. Meanwhile, a Democrat can win overwhelmingly, and the first thing out of a Republican's mouth is, "What makes you think they've got a mandate? They need to run every bill through us first, and unless they say pretty please and triplicate, they can't get anything done." It's Republicans. They're jackasses at times. So, that being said, they're trying to portray this election here as some sort of massive, rejection of Democrats in this. And this is actually an insanely close election at this point. Over the weekend, as California, Oregon, Washington, and other western states move closer to completing their counts, Trump's percentage with the popular vote fell below 50% of just the vote itself. His margin of victory looked to be much smaller than initially anticipated. In fact, all of the 59 presidential elections since the nation's founding, it appears that after all the 2024 votes are counted, only 5 popular vote winners in history will have prevailed in a smaller percentage margins than Trump. So, no, not a mandate. Trump's popular vote advantage has declined steadily since election night. As of Monday afternoon, Trump was at 49.49%, while Harris is at 48.26%, according to the authoritative Cook Political Reports tracking the results across the country. We can expect the Republican total will only continue to tick downward as heavily Democratic states on the West Coast finalize their vote totals. Let's put this into perspective. Trump is winning a lower percentage of the popular vote this year than Biden did in 2020, Obama did in 2012, Obama did in 2008, W. Bush in 2004, H.W. Bush in 88, Ronald Reagan in 84, Reagan in 1980, or Jimmy Carter in 76. You're less than Jimmy Carter and Joe Biden for that matter. And, of course, Trump's numbers are way below those of the presidents who won could reasonably be described as unprecedented or powerful mandates, such as Nixon's 60.7 in 1972, but the Democrats were a mess. Lyndon Johnson's 61.1% in 64, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 60.8%. As Trump's percentage continues to slide, he'll fall below those thresholds achieved by most presidents in the past century. So we're looking at numbers here. I went to Cook. The total number of votes cast in this country. Mind you, and I'm going to I'll get to this here in a little bit, and I'll flush this out a little bit for you. The population of the United States of America currently, as you look at the census clock, is 337,441,651. So well over 300,000. The total amount of people that voted this election is only 153,486,905, which means that half the population voted. Now, granted, part of the population is under the age of 18, so that's kind of the reason why. Of those that voted, just of those who voted, Trump is, as I mentioned earlier, is at 49.94%, and that has gone down. As a matter of fact, when I was going to think about trying to bring this up yesterday, it was at 49.98% yesterday. It's now down to 49.94%. He is going to finish well behind 50%. And Harris is at 28.26%. So basically, it's a 1.7% margin of victory was there for him. That was it as far as the popular vote goes. You need to put it in perspective, though, because one of the things that the national news media, the failures in the frickin' national news media, who consistently still today allow Republicans to come. I was watching, CNN. They had some idiot from Florida, some Republican idiot from Florida saying this Matt Gaetz investigation was only started yesterday by Joe Biden. What are you talking about? It's been in the works for 3 years, man. No one knew he was going to be the AG. No one would think that he'd be that dumb to make him the AG. So, no, this is not something that's new. It's been out there. But, of course, CNN didn't challenge that. Did they really say that? Well, okay. You know, just turn off CNN, turn off MSNBC, cancel the subscriptions to the Times, the Washington Post. Stop looking at Huffington Post. That's worthless. Huffington Post is worthless. AP is worthless. Seriously. They're all they're doing is basically pandering to Trump and the Republicans, and it's not worth your time. But maybe someone in the national news media, as they sit there and say, what a massive mandate for Donald Trump, should realize when you look at just 18 and older in the United States, which is the people that could vote, which is 262,083,034 people. Donald Trump got 29% of the vote of them. That's just of the voting age population in the United States. Only 29% of them voted for Donald Trump, which means 71% didn't vote for Donald Trump, okay? 71% of the voting age population did not vote for Donald Trump. Of the actual population, 337,441,651 people, only 22% of those people voted for Donald Trump, which, if my math skills are holding true, 78% of this country did not vote for Donald Trump to be president of the United States. 78%. And I can tell you right now that 22% is going to dramatically freaking hurt the 78%. But it does go back to what I was talking about yesterday in regards to the messaging and how the Democrats have failed because they just can't get their freaking messaging out. The Republicans are masters at being popular with 22% of the population, of controlling the message for 100% of the population. That is how the Democrats are grossly outnumbered on this. It's just reality. These are just facts. Trump has held a 1.7-point lead in the popular vote as of Monday morning, according to the New York Times. That's smaller than former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's 2.1-point popular vote win in 2016, less than half than Joe Biden's 4.5 win in there. So right now, he is actually Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 2016 by 2.1%. Donald Trump is at 1.7%. So technically, he's less popular than Hillary Clinton in this country. And yeah, but this is what happens when you have election after election where the Democrats just basically stay home and they hand this power to this minority. Because I can tell you, Dr. freaking Oz is going to be in charge of Medicaid, Medicare. Dr. Oz. The guy that talks about like plum enemas. That guy. His own signature brand of plum enemas. Boy, you'll feel better. Will you? Well, I don't know if you will, but okay. Good luck with all that. But this is just, it's settling in for these guys. The reality of what's going on out there. Consumer sentiment among Republicans has soared since the election. Once again, still Joe Biden's economy, and they all are thinking it's fantastic. Elections, suddenly Republicans are on board with the reality that they're all secure. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he saw no evidence of fraud in the 2024 campaign. I want to make sure you understand. Every single day up until the election, the news media, which has forsaken us, has basically writing the story going, oh, God, here's another Republican saying there are serious problems with the election. I guess the only positive side of that is watching guys like Hovde over in Wisconsin and Kerry Lake in Arizona, where there are these atrocious Republican candidates where they've lost. There is no appetite in D.C. to try to help them insist that the voting was fraud. And so yesterday, Hovde over in Wisconsin conceded his election. There's no one, they're not about to contest in Arizona, Wisconsin specifically, a state that Donald Trump won the election was fraudulent. They're just not about to do that. So that should be pretty much the end of both of those guys. I also posted this morning a story about farmers being upset. Farmers are panicking about President Trump's return to the White House in 2025. Trump's promise to enact mass deportations could result in massive loss of revenue for farmers who rely on immigrant labor to stay afloat. The idea of mass deportation is frightening and scary just on a humane level, says dairy farmer Jennifer Tilton Flood reportedly. With regards to our community, mass deportations could affect our entire dairy industry throughout the U.S. About 950,000, or nearly 45% out of an estimated 2.2 million farm laborers in the United States, are undocumented immigrants, Newsweek has reported. Flood argued businesses and churches could expect catastrophic nightmares to come to the United States. Customs and Border Protection came under the Trump's control. Well, it's going to. So there is great chance for the families to be broken apart. A lot of my team are raising Americans at home, and so it's tough. There's a lot of concern and there's a lot of panic. This is the great ugly truth of these guys. And if you look at what Republicans have done in this, Alabama, Florida particularly, they passed laws which were designed to basically go after undocumented workers. And if you go to both of those states, there were Republicans, and far-right Republicans too, who suddenly came on out and said, now, I want to assure all the undocumented workers that are working on these farms, I have talked to the governor, there's not going to be any raids in this area, you can go there as long as you're working on the farm, they're going to turn a blind eye. That was their argument. It didn't work. Both of those states have had actual trouble getting undocumented workers. But if they start rounding people up, and they are intent on doing this, I guarantee you there is going to be a massive exodus out of this country because, no, people do not, especially parents with kids, don't want to see their kids sent off to Honduras while they're sent to Mexico, or they're sent to Colombia while their kids are sent to Puerto Rico or something like that. Well, that's what they're going to. I shouldn't say Puerto Rico, that's the United States. They'll send them to Cuba or something like that. But that's the concern that they have, and I think a lot of these undocumented workers are going to leave and get out of this country very quickly, and that's going to be trouble come September. It's the Matt McNeil Show. It is the Matt McNeil Show. Nice to have you with us today. 952-946-6205. So after the election, I had one of my friends, 89-year-old dad, they posted something to her, and she shared it with me, and I cleaned it up a little bit. It was a little, just kind of a father to a daughter thing, but I think it made a lot of sense, and this was the post. Number one, take a deep breath. 2, keep a stiff upper lip. 3, be ready to support everyone you know who is Black, Hispanic, Native American, poor, LGBTQIA+, an immigrant, a woman, or pregnant. It'll be worse for them. 4, keep doing whatever it is you need to do that helps you get through the night and helps keep the fear away. 5, keep a low profile. People with guns, no morals, and few brains are now running the show, and that'll be a problem for the rest of us. 6, remember those things. Remember these things too shall pass. And 7, survive and endure. This is going to be chaotic, so keep yourself safe. Number 5 particularly upset a few conservatives when I said keep a low profile. People with guns and no morals and few brains are now running the show. And they said, that's just not true, Matt. I can show you threats I've gotten. And it's funny because when I contradict them, what their mentality is, well, someone should shoot you. You're like, okay, thank you for contradicting me. My God, where did I ever get that idea? I've actually had that happen where I brought this up and said, no, this is really going on. And they said, well, maybe you deserve it. And you're like, wow, really? There is an angriness in the right which I just don't understand. There's a meme that's going around right now on social media. In 2024, only 2 states voted unanimously for one of the candidates. The first one is Massachusetts, which voted for Kamala Harris unanimously. Every county in the state voted for Harris. First in education, second in health care, first in quality of life, first in test scores, top 10 least poverty in the nation. The state that voted unanimously for Trump was Oklahoma. 44th in education, 49th in health care, 44th in quality of life, 50th in test scores, top 10 worst in poverty. I don't know what you do when you're in a state like that, and you can see that the Republicans, who have basically been in charge for decades, have failed you spectacularly, and yet you still are terrified of voting against a Republican. I can't help you. But a lot of what this is based on is hatred and anger and fear, and that is what this is scary. And that's why that point in that list is very valid, is because there's a lot of people out there where hate and anger is their entire shtick. And we're going to force you to do this. And that's why they're, by the way, have you noticed how many of them are somewhat incensed when you dog on Trump still now today? It's like, he won, you need to be nice to him now. Screw that, he's a jackass. There you go. And they were like, grr, grr. They're angry. This weekend, and religious content, you do or don't do whatever it is you do or don't want to do. I'm not here to convert anyone. I'm just talking about things from my own perspective. I'm a Christian. We had our service dealing with the Gospel of Mark, the fishes and loaves story, which appears in all the Gospels. And reminder, the Gospels are the actual story of Jesus. You know, the guy, the Christ in Christian? Yeah, that guy. These are the books. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John should matter to you because this is the story of Jesus. And for a lot of conservative Republican Americans, they don't care about those books because those books contradict what their political narrative is. They look at what Pontius Pilate did and said, let the prisoner go. Hey, that's our guy. That's what they want to do. Barabbas, I mean, it's good around Easter. You'll get the story. Never mind. But that is they try desperately to find passages in Romans and Timothy and Leviticus to basically back them up and ignore any teachings that basically they don't like. And that is the modern Republican. And I just don't like that as a Christian. The fishes and loaves story is truly one of the better stories there because here he is. He doesn't care who's in the crowd. He doesn't care who the people are. He just feeds them. He just feeds them. Fishes and loaves, everyone eats, ta-da. Boom. Gospel of Matthew. I've talked about the Gospel of Matthew quite a bit. There's a little passage in there. It's a good read about, Jesus telling you directly that you have to feed the hungry, take care of the sick, offer shelter for the homeless, visit the prisoners, give people, welcoming strangers from strange lands. Those are the things you have to do. And the Republicans frantically run away from those teachings because they're not really Christians. They're Trumpians who basically bastardize the Bible for their own use. And it makes me mad. It makes me really mad. Because as I've talked about before, I look at my faith as something that's beauty. It's love, caring, compassion, acceptance. Jesus went out there and preached to the margins of society, the people that were being persecuted, the people on the outside. And no, their version of Jesus is he's a big bully that likes to push down, gay people and smite people who he disagrees with. That was not who he was. It was not. But this is where you guys are at. The real failure of the left and this country will be if the rest of us fall down into that rabbit hole, the rabbit hole of hate and anger. I have said it's going to be interesting, especially we talk about the stuff like the farmers and stuff like this. It's going to be really interesting when all of a sudden karma hits you guys. Now, I am not for mass deportations. You guys are. You're the ones that voted for it. You're going to get a big surprise here. I'm not going to be feeling too sorry for the farmer who basically all of a sudden can't pick his crops. I'll feel sorry for the immigrant who is doing this labor at a lower rate than we would do it for and is now running for their life because the ICE Gestapo is after them. I'm not cheering on your pain. I'm sitting back and bracing myself and preparing myself for you to experience what you have done to yourselves. But here's one thing I won't do. I'm not going to enjoy watching you suffer. Unlike you, I actually care about fellow human beings. So I'm not going to enjoy watching you suffer, but I'm sure not going to allow you to ignore the realities of who did this to you. Look in the mirror. Chicago, Seattle. I will talk to you on a Wednesday with Jeff Stein. Minneapolis, St. Paul, Hour 2 up next. Hour number 2 of the show here on your Tuesday. Matt and Brett here today. Brett, I'm still not feeling the Christmas stuff, man. I'm just not quite there yet. I got to have my Thanksgiving. Well, I got to have my Thanksgiving. And I understand Thanksgiving is late this year, but I was watching. Did you watch any of the Monday night game, football?
Oh, not last night. Not with the Cowboys in it, no.
It wasn't good. It was pretty rough to watch. But, I mean, just every commercial now, I mean, and it's been this way since after Halloween. It's Christmas time. No, it's not. It's November 4th. It's November 9th. Today's the 19th. It's not Christmas time. I've worked out. Okay, so here you go. We've worked out the Thanksgiving menu here. Turkey. All right. I got cornbread stuffing. Where we're going to be doing that. Green bean casserole. Mashed potatoes. I got to be doing Brussels sprouts. A little bit of butternut squash. And the pies this year. We have decided as a family that we are, and I'm about to get into the controversial subjects you expect from me here on AM 950. Matt McNeil, controversy erupting in front of our face. I am forsaking ourselves in regards to pumpkin pie. We have made the decision that the pumpkin pie just doesn't get eaten, and nobody wants it, and so we're doing apple, cherry, and pecan, and that's our choices there. Your thoughts on this controversial episode of the Matt McNeil Show where pumpkin pie is now been put to the side?
I don't know about that. I kind of like pumpkin pie.
There's every Thanksgiving we end up having our own little pie chart where 1/4 of it's gone from Thanksgiving Day, and then it's like we find it like an archaeological dig in the back of our fridge. Oh, here it is. Oh, it hasn't been touched in 3 weeks. Okay.
Oh, so you think everyone does like the token really thin slice? Hey, we had a little bit of it, and then no one has anymore.
I just hope it doesn't all of a sudden like, why did we have pumpkin pie? I do have to do our good friend Terry Jonzilla, who I'm going to try to get on the air on Friday for a Thanksgiving show that we do with him. Terry Jonzilla, we do generally have one of his chocolate silk pies, which the kids today said, oh, I don't know if we need to get that. If I don't get that, they are just going to be livid because he does just an absolutely delicious pie. And so I get a bunch of pies from him. It's fantastic. I still make my own pecan pie because, it's my pie, man. That's my favorite is pecan pie. My absolute favorite.
You make it yourself, too? Nice.
Yeah. This does bring up, as we mentioned food for Thanksgiving, it does bring up a dark day in Minnesota's past. You think people talk about the blizzard of 1991. That was not the greatest story that has affected us in the last few years. No, 10 years ago to this date, 10 years ago, we were subjected to a travesty in this state that shall never be forgiven. Grape salad. Do you remember this story? Tell me, the New York Times doing their side dishes of America? Grape salad? Okay, so this was, if you don't remember this, in 2014, the New York Times showed how little journalistic integrity they have by doing a compilation of what would be iconic side dishes in every of the states. Now, I mean, I remember talking about this 10 years ago. Wild rice, something with wild rice would obviously be the choice in Minnesota. It's not at every Thanksgiving gathering or gathering I've been to, but it's at a lot of them. There's always a wild rice of some sort. There's a fine option right there. I would say, kind of, I guess, butternut squash, I don't know. I mean, there's some things that I think are universal in multiple states. I don't know if there's necessarily there. But definitely wild rice was the one at that point that we came across and said, yeah, this is going to be it. Unless you do like an appetizer of maybe a little smoked fish or something like that. There you go, Minnesota. Magnifique. If I remember the story correctly, the New York Times, out of freaking laziness, apparently one guy at the Times knew an editor who knew a wealthy couple. I think they were out on Marine on St. Croix. And they asked him, what's a traditional dish that most Minnesotans have on Thanksgiving? and she came up with grape salad, a roasted grape monstrosity that included sour cream and brown sugar and was served cold. Now, I remember when I read this, there comes the moment you say to yourself, is this really? Have I just not had it? And I remember the producer at the time we had this show. I said, have you ever had this? I said, I never had this. I said, I never had this. And we ended up taking like 100 calls saying, what are you talking about? Grape salad. Grape salad? What the heck is that? And apparently it's this, some woman, it's my time to be relating to the commoners. Oh, okay. It said we had grape salad. And so there's this edition of the United States of Thanksgiving from 2014 out of the New York Times, which says we all eat grape salad, and I had never had grape salad in my life. I remember we were sitting here saying, are they talking about like Jell-O salad with some grapes in it? Because usually I've had that like a summertime church thing. I've had some Jell-O salads at like Thanksgiving, but nothing like a grape version of that. Have you ever had a grape salad?
I have not, no, but now that you describe this person living on Marine on St. Croix, that sounds like something Claude would whip up for Thanksgiving.
Claude, man-serving Claude, get over here. All right, what I want you to do is go get some of those succulently rubbed grapes from that wonderful organic grape winery. We want to roast them in the olive oil, and then go get a tub of sour cream. Yes, sir. Man-serving Claude. Oh, God. Yeah, that does sound a little man-serving Claude-ish, doesn't it? God, even just the thought of this. Who would eat this? Who's walking up to the old buffet line? What sick, twisted world are you living in? You're walking up to the buffet line. Oh, boy. Look at the sour cream and brown sugar-infused grapes. Yum, yum. Pass on the turkey.
I really hope someone that's attending your Thanksgiving gathering is listening today and is just going to make that to troll you.
Don't do that. No, this is why I make all my own food. No, I don't want. I will shut the door in your face. You're on your own. Enjoy your grape salad. No, man. They didn't. Here's the problem. Here's why New York Times was just so bad back then with this. There are a ton of people they could have called in this town and said, hey, how often do you have grape salad? Come again? It's like that would have been the entire conversation. It was like, do you remember when the guy did the tourism thing for Minneapolis and the restaurant that he visited that everyone had to stop by was the Potbelly over in the IDS Tower? Wow, really? What do you mean? A Burger King, you say? Wow, all right. I mean, nothing against Potbelly. They're fine. But, I mean, I got a few places in town that will blow your mind if you think that's good. It's nothing. They're bad. It's just I know some better places.
Famous pizzas in New York, Sbarro.
Well, you would be killed if you did that in New York. And that's the thing too. And I remember that too. Is if we ever wrote something in Minnesota that said, great New York pizza is a Domino's. They would send troops over to attack us for violating their cultural norms. And yet they didn't even think about calling one food reviewer, chef, anyone outside of man-serving Claude, we want seconds on the grapes. Oh, you think the blizzard's going to live on in infamy? No. Grape salad from the New York Times, that is going to live on in infamy. I will never forgive you jackasses for doing that to us. Just like, what? Because the rest of the country thinks we're weird. Now, we are kind of. But, that's us. We like being weird. It's a good place. The rest of the world is like, they got like traditional sides and, all these things. And we're up here with grape salad like we don't know what food is. This is delicious, I'll never forgive him for that. Never. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. A king? All right. You got Patrick Coolican, Minnesota reformer. He joins us usually here on Tuesdays to talk about some of the stories they've been covering. What did you guys jump on into today?
Yeah, we have a lot of stories we're talking about, including this fine that was brought against a company, a meatpacking company in Minnesota that was hiring underage workers, some as young as the ages of like 12, 13, 14 years old. They're paying a fine, which, by the way, won't put a dent into their bottom line whatsoever because they have a big corporate parent company. We're talking that, also getting Patrick's thoughts on Ken Martin running for the DNC chair, and we'll talk a little bit about the state legislature as well, since it sounds like they're going to have alternate days in terms of who's chairing committees, so that could be a little bit of a mess.
Oh, that's going to be a massive mess. Are you serious? That's what they're thinking of doing?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's going to be a nightmare.
Like the sprinkler system, odd days, even days. Yeah.
And the Republicans just won't show up for the days that they're not in charge, and then they'll demand that everything. This is good. You guys can't do that. That's going to be a nightmare. That's going to be a mess. Well, good luck with all that. All right, it is Patrick Coolican from the Minnesota Reformer with Brett right here on AM 950.
AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Brett Johnson joining you here on a Tuesday afternoon. And as usual on Tuesdays, we are joined by Patrick Coolican, who is the editor-in-chief of the Minnesota Reformer. Great resource for the best in Minnesota news and politics over at MinnesotaReformer.com. As we have a lot of topics to talk about today, including Ken Martin, possibly... Well, not just possibly, he is seeking to be the new chair of the DNC. We'll also be talking about some labor violations at food processing plants around Minnesota and the entire Midwest, plus some political news as well, including how it looks like the House of Representatives, which is evenly divided between DFLers and Republicans, are going to have a bunch of co-chairs in committees. What could possibly go wrong with that? So, Patrick, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. So let's start off talking about some of these issues that we've been having with a lot of our food processing plants, not just around Minnesota and the Midwest, but really the entire country. Because there have been a number of stories about child labor law violations with food processing plants in the Midwest, including here in Minnesota. We have examples including Tony Downs Food Company in Medalia, Minnesota. We also have Wisconsin-based Packer Sanitation Services, who paid civil penalties to the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division for employing minor children in hazardous occupations at their meatpacking facilities, including one in Minnesota. Then between 2021 and 2023, a St. James, Minnesota-based area plant owned by Smithfield employed at least 11 children underage between the ages of 14 and 17. Well, now that meat processing plant Smithfield is set to pay a $2 million penalty to resolve that child labor compliance order with the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry, which will end up being the largest child labor enforcement action in the history of this agency. So I guess my question for you would be, while this sounds significant in terms of this being the largest fine they've ever levied, if we look at the parent company of Smithfield, this is largely only going to be a drop in the bucket, correct?
Yeah, this is the problem with regulatory compliance and these kinds of penalties when you're dealing with companies that are so massive. In this case, Smithfield is owned by Hong Kong-based WH Group Limited, which has an annual revenue of over $25 billion. So if you think about a $2 million fine, and I'm glad the DLI, or Department of Labor and Industry, were able to get that penalty. But if you look at that as a portion of that company's bottom line, it's essentially a rounding error and not something they're going to feel at all. And I think you really got a sense for that from the press release that the company put out, which was really quite combative at times and said, well, we're not admitting any fault here, and but we are paying this because we don't want to deal with we want to put this behind us, essentially. And they claimed that the mistake was not theirs, and they used the federal government's E-Verify system, and that these children essentially had hoodwinked this massive company into hiring them. So I think that's, I mean, it was interesting to me how they reacted, and how DLI reacted with justifiable, I think, sense of doing the right thing, but then the company responds by saying, really, this isn't even our fault, and we're not accepting blame, and we'll pay the $2 million when we take in $25 billion in revenue every year.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't look good if you have young teenagers working these very dangerous jobs. And even though, as you said, Smithfield was fined by this, they were very combative in their press release, and they're pretty much just putting the onus on this E-Verify system and even the kids themselves for lying on their application. So to me, at least, with that combative press release, even though they are facing this fine, it doesn't really seem like much is going to change in terms of their policies. They're just kind of throwing their hands in the air, it seems like, and saying, well, it's the E-Verify system that let us down, not anything we did wrong.
It shows you how toothless regulation is in the face of this massive corporate power. And one of the great contradictions of this incoming Trump administration will be that, on the one hand, they hate immigrants and want to deport them. On the other hand, they have no interest, I don't think, in regulating these big companies because they have such important financial ties, that is the Trump administration, to massive conglomerates.
Yeah, absolutely. And make sure you check out more on that, titled Smithfield's $2 million child labor penalty dwarfed by parent company's annual $26 billion in sales. Make sure you check that out at MinnesotaReformer.com. I know Matt talked quite a bit about that Smithfield story when that first broke, so it's a follow-up on what happened with that fine and how it kind of looks like, unfortunately, not much is probably going to change, even though they are facing that $2 million fine. Switch gears now, and let's head over to the political realm. And I just have a couple of questions for you on this. And it has to do with a couple of races that are heading towards recounts for the Minnesota State Legislature. In fact, two of them are heading to recounts. In District 54A, provisional ballots show that DFL Representative Brad Tabke is ahead of his Republican challenger by a 14-vote lead, while over in District 14B, DFL incumbent Dan Wolgamott is ahead of his Republican challenger by about 191 votes. Now, especially as we look at that Tabke race and we say, well, that's only a 14-vote margin. Couldn't that change in recounts? Well, history, as Christopher Ingram had a chance to look at with the top line, doesn't look like we're likely to see a whole lot of movement when it comes to recounts. Sometimes we'll see some single-digit vote counts, but really not enough to turn any elections, correct?
Right. Chris looked into the history here, and what you see generally is a handful of votes, but never enough to change a race. I think the last time a race was actually changed by a recount was 1986. So I don't expect that to happen, although anything is possible. And the changes have become even smaller since we've adopted the all electronic. And I think that you get a sense from this also from 2020, which was in the end probably the most scrutinized American election in history because of the Trump phony fraud claims, and we saw repeatedly that we had hand counting of ballots, and it would match the original count. So. I don't expect that those races will change, but certainly anything is possible.
And if those races don't end up changing, we, of course, will end up with a divided 67-67 DFL Republican State House of Representatives. And in fact, I want to talk a little bit more about that because Minnesota House leaders did announce a plan that when the 2025 legislative session starts in January, committees are going to be co-chaired by both a DFLer and a Republican member. I don't know about you, but I'm not thinking that agreement is going to last real long. I don't know how you're going to try to move bills through committees if you have co-chairs, if you have the Democrats saying, no, this bill needs to move, and the Republican says stop, or vice versa. This doesn't look like a recipe that's going to last, but maybe I'll be proven wrong. What are your thoughts on this idea of now having co-chairs of many of these committees?
Well, they do it with conference committees. Those are that's a joint committee of House and Senate members in which they meet to iron out differences in their bills and come up with a compromise measure, and they will alternate who gets the gavel, the Senate chair one day and then the House chair the other day. So that's what I imagine they're talking about here is one day the Republican gets to be the chair and the other day the Democrat. I have to say, for a long time, I really sort of scoffed at the advocates of civility in politics and the deterioration of civility and all this. I come from a more maybe fractious and confrontational style of political debate, and I thought that was fine. But I do think that the past decade have shown the value of civility in politics, because we've just completely lost all of it due to the president-elect and his behavior. And so I'm actually eager to see this 67-67 Minnesota House and see how whether or not our national reputation for civility here in Minnesota, sometimes called Minnesota Nice, how well it will make this 67-67 tie function. I think if nothing else, it forces Republicans and Democrats to see each other maybe as just a little bit human, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm a little more pessimistic on it. I'm with you that it would be nice to see this work out, but I could even see some disagreements if they're talking about alternating which days a party is able to control those committees. I could see one saying, well, wait a second, why do they get the odd days and we get the even days? Since typically in odd day or in months with an odd number of days, whoever has the odd number will get one extra day. I could see something even happening with that, but we'll see. I hope to be proven wrong. As you said, it would be a nice example to set for the rest of the country, but it's going to be interesting to see coming up in January of 2025. All right, one area I know where they could find an area of compromise would be talking about online sports betting. And you recently wrote a column talking about how legalizing online sports betting, maybe not the best idea, and in fact, we maybe should be a little thankful for the fact that it didn't pass during the last session. And I want to go to your column where you quote your father as saying, "I'd rather be lucky than good," as you were talking about the fact that online sports gambling was not legalized in Minnesota last session. So do you think that failure to pass sports betting legislation last session was really pure luck, or might have there been some political dynamics at play that prevented that from getting passed? And could it actually happen coming up in this session now that we have that evenly divided House?
Yeah, with the Democratic or DFL trifecta was very clear at the get-go that any kind of expansion of gambling and sports gambling in particular in this case was going to require the okay of our tribal nations, who at this point have most of the gambling market. And the tribal nations, I think, are somewhat ambivalent about moving forward on sports gambling. But as it happens, as I tried to argue, whether or not it was by choice or not, the fact that we don't have legalized gambling has probably saved a lot of Minnesotans a lot of money. And we know this because we can look at other states. Since the Supreme Court decision in 2018 that struck down a federal law that prevented states from passing legal gambling, a lot of states have passed it. I think it's like 39 maybe, and including a lot of our neighbors. And we already have plenty of research now on states that have legalized sports gambling, especially online sports gambling, where you essentially have a casino in your pocket at all times, and those that have not. And the risks, the financial risks in those states are really quite high. People are more likely to have really bad financial outcomes, including a noticeable rise in personal bankruptcies. And, I mean, this is the scariest one of all. We're seeing an increase in domestic violence in states with online sports betting. Now, even though it's not legal here in Minnesota, people say, well, you can go find it offshore, and you can. But the reality is that in the states where it's legal, more people are playing, and it's especially what I would consider to be a vulnerable population, like young men. And I don't think that we need to be giving them a sports book and putting it in their pocket to be walking around, and the opportunity to make bets 24/7.
You can read more about that in Patrick's column on online sports betting, again, over at MinnesotaReformer.com. One more topic to get to you with, and that has to do with Ken Martin, who is the current chair of the DFL here in Minnesota. As he has announced, he is going to be running for the national Democratic chair. He wants to be the DNC chair. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on Ken Martin and possibly his chances. I know he does have a number of endorsements, and he can also point to the resume that he has in the state of Minnesota, as the DFL has put up some pretty massive fundraising numbers during past election cycles. We can also point to the fact that Minnesota does have a statewide winning streak for Democrats that dates back to 2006. So I'm curious how you think his resume plays out with national Democrats and whether he has a chance to become the chair of the DNC. At least as I kind of look at it, I know he's run into many of the other issues that Democratic chairs around the country have run into, where they've lost rural support but have very much gained in metro areas. But what are your thoughts on Ken Martin now seeking the chair of being the DNC?
I would think he has a good shot at it. Even though he is Minnesota-based operative, he has strong ties to the national party. He is currently a vice chair. He's been the president of the State Party Chairs Association. So he's done a lot of traveling. I know that he's getting help from Amy Klobuchar's camp, and I wouldn't be surprised if Tim Walz was also making calls for him. And so there is national support there. I think that he, as a proven fundraiser, he's a guy who's proven that he can put together a really well-functioning state party. That winning streak, I think, goes a long way. We are from a Midwestern state, and I think there's definitely a sense that Democrats have to do well in the Midwest. And for whatever you think of Martin, what's undeniably true is he's really gone out of his way to try to marginalize left-wing voices. I mean, I've seen this personally when he actually penned a commentary for us in which he was trying to really push back on the defund police discourse among Democrats in 20 and 21 especially. And then he did so again with some sharp comments directed at the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, when they put out a statement after October 7th. But, I think, he would tell you that he's trying to craft a party, build a party that's going to appeal to the broadest base of Americans. I thought he had a commentary yesterday on Fox News, which is an interesting venue to put it. And he said something to the effect of we have to speak directly, normally, and succinctly to the American public. And so I think that he wasn't very specific, but I think that he certainly is a guy with a long and successful resume here, and I think he'd be a pretty good candidate.
I think so, too, on paper, that he's probably going to be one of the favorites, especially since he, at least on direct paper, doesn't have those direct ties to D.C., I should say, where he's been able to be a state chair. I think it's probably going to end up being one of the state party chairs that will end up being the head of the DNC, but we'll have to see if it ends up being Ken Martin at the end of the day. We have been speaking with Patrick Coolican. He is the editor-in-chief of the Minnesota Reformer. Again, make sure you go to MinnesotaReformer.com for the best in Minnesota news and politics. And as always, Patrick, thanks so much for coming back on the show today.
Always a pleasure.
All right, let's take a break and send things back over to Matt McNeil on AM 950.
AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota, the Matt McNeil Show. An inch of snow, you say? It's not going to be an inch might fall out of the sky. Ain't going to be on the ground, man.
Yeah, I'm not Sven Sundgaard over there.
Well,
So
it's going to fall. It's just still too warm on the ground for it to happen. And once again, I had to put up public service announcements. We have a lot of people that have moved to Minnesota. If it's 42 degrees, it's not icy out. You don't have to drive at 45 miles an hour. I'm just going.
oh, did I have to deal with that yesterday?
Oh
yeah.
God, I had to deal with that.
It was like 49 degrees, and people are still.
Oh God, it's slippery out here, isn't it?
Got to go 5 miles an hour down the entrance ramp to the freeway.
We'll be fine. I mean, I'll Tokyo drift it around you, man. I'll get around. I'll be fine. All right, 32 degrees. That's freezing. There you go. Maybe 33 in a low-lying area. Sure, be careful. 41. You're okay. You can. It's the road. It's cold, but it's not frozen. The more you know, rainbow emoji. He drives an old Ford Bronco, wears tight-fitting khakis and a red sweater and a sports coiffed silver hair. The new weirdly hot Target holiday ad, shopper says of the TV spots, it's Hot Santa. Are we really this much of a lonely society?
Just to repeat yourself, did you say he's in skinny khakis and Santa?
Tight-fitting khakis.
That's how I always picture Santa.
Rudolph is leading the way, if you know what I mean. Dear Lord.
Santa in tight-fitting business casual.
He played pickleball. And they put some pickleball courts up there, and he's just doing that there. Chris K. Oh, so it's not Santa. It's Chris K. Man, dude, man. I mean, there's this vegetable drink, man, I have every morning. It just cleans me right out. I feel so awesome right heading into the day. Oh, for God's sake. If please don't be this lonely. I mean, I hate to say this to you, but please do not. No, don't. No. Hot Santa is part of Target's new holiday marketing campaign, leads into shopping being fun as opposed to transactional. Come get your stocking stuffed at Target. Hello there. Oh, what aisle is that in again? All right. They're made by Target's long-standing agency, Mythology of New York City. Yes, holiday season may not buy all the fun in Minneapolis-based retailer. Well, if it's anything Target says about potential tariffs proposed by President Trump when it reports its earnings on Wednesday morning. Okay, that's a way to bring down the sex Santa thing. Some analysts say Target would be more exposed to the tariffs than rival Walmart because the Minneapolis-based retailer revenue is more dependent on imported goods versus its grocery heavy competitor. So I think we're all screwed, but hey, fine. Hot Santa! Is Hot Santa going to get us, I'm sorry, we have to let you go. It's seasonal work. I mean, really it is. I mean, it's quite literally the textbook definition of seasonal work.
I'm just hoping that he becomes part of the war on Christmas with Fox News.
Okay. With us. What are you talking about? I mean, they'll probably give him a Saturday show.
It'll be appointed some secretary.
Let me tell you about it. The working class, the elves, they work for the man. And if we allow them to unionize, guess what? We lose, world. All right, fine. I mean, is that you got to make sure we know what's going on in that Target store with the Hot Santa? Is the Hot Santa looking to, give some gift giving ideas, if you know what I mean? I'm not letting that one go. 952-946-6205. 952-946-6205. The DFL, you heard Coolican there talking about Ken Martin. He's throwing his hat into the ring to be the Democratic National Committee chair. A step up from the DFL here in the state. Was it Martin O'Malley is the other guy that has put his name out there? That is the former, is it the governor of Maryland?
Yeah, governor of Maryland and very fringe 2016 candidate.
Yeah, that's right. He didn't really last too long out there. I think it lasted a little bit longer than others. It's fine. It's fine. I will say, okay, My concern, and this is after I heard you guys, I heard you and Coolican talking, and if you missed that, make sure you listen to that on the podcast. There's one thing that he kind of sort of said is that this is a guy who's basically pushed back against the progressive side of the party, and then he also talked about trying to make a coalition. And I'm not against kind of a coalition. And, hey, you know what? There are things on the right. You've heard me rip on Angie Craig. There's things on the left. I have ripped on Ilhan Omar at times. There are times where things on the extremes basically should not be derailing the central message of the Democratic Party. I am 100% cool with that, dude. I am, Ken. I'm very cool with that. But what you cannot be is what has failed us in the last 30 years in this country as Democrats when we have failed, which is, well, where else are you going to go, traditional Democrats and progressive left? Where else are you going to go? Well, you better get on board with the moderate Democratic plan or else we'll just keep losing. You can't be that. You worked as a intern. Didn't I see that on there? I did not know this. You worked on an intern on Wellstone's campaign way back when, which is cool. You worked for Paul Wellstone, who said, we all do better when we all do better. He's exactly right. Equal tide raises all boats, man. Find your traditional middle-of-the-road Democratic strategy. Not far left to the progressives, not Republican light like Angie Craig. Find the middle ground. Because this can't be, and I get it, and we'll talk a little bit about messaging here in a second, but this can't just be do what the moderate Democrats want or else. That can't be your coalition. That can't be your consensus. All you're going to do is just make more Democrats mad, and you're going to lose even more races. Talk to Governor Walz. Walz is good. Seriously, there are very few politicians, I think, that get what the Democratic Party is about better than Governor Walz. Have him on speed dial. I would say as well, you cannot run campaigns like Angie Craig did, where I really don't like the Democratic Party and expect to win nationally. You cannot forsake the party for a handful of candidates nationwide. And I am still of the convinced belief that Angie Craig's, what's with those Democrats DFL campaign cost the Minnesota Democrats, the DFL, the House in the state of Minnesota. I really do. But that being said, because it was your most visible campaign, Klobuchar wasn't. Klobuchar didn't have a race. I mean, that was a train wreck of a candidate for the Republicans. But Klobuchar didn't have a race. So you decided Angie Craig was going to be the primary statewide race, and that burns you a little bit. It can't be your main message. And as the head of the DFL, you saw that going on, man, and you cannot allow that to be the overwhelming message, especially in suburbs which lean more liberal, man. Forget about like Hopkins and St. Louis Park and Richfield and stuff like that. You go out to Minnetonka now. You're going out to Eden Prairie. You're going up to Maple Grove. Maybe not as much Maple Grove, but Woodbury. Most of these suburbs now, these secondary and tertiary suburbs are becoming, they're not going toss-up anymore. They definitely lean D. And going out there and saying, oh, don't the Democrats suck? That's not a winning message. And when you're running Angie Craig and that message, that was the message the entire metro area heard because they were all running all the metro area stations. You can't do that because all you do is turn off voters. And I can tell you right now, there are a ton of Democrats who are sick of this, and especially after the election, her bashing on the Democratic Party. That can't be your most visible thing. Vote Democrat. We suck. That can't be what you want to do. By the way, don't ever clip that clip. That's actually, do clip that clip. That's actually not a bad clip. We can use that one.
We'll send that to the DNC chair, and that's your slogan. The DNC committee.
We'll get T-shirts made. That's good stuff right there. But that can't be your message. We just saw it really didn't help you. It helped Angie, but at what cost? And Angie really, and frankly, Angie, look at the margin she had there. She didn't need to go down that scorched earth path. She didn't need to do that. And yet she did. And it cost you the Minnesota House. That's my theory, at least. The other problem is, so once again, if you're going to make a coalition, the coalition just can't be the moderate Democrats and all the rest of you sit down and shut up and come along because where else are you going to go? That can't be your coalition. Two, you can't run campaigns where the campaign itself is, sweeping the leg Johnny to the rest of the DFL. The third thing goes back to what I was talking about yesterday. You guys, and here is the biggest freaking riddle for me. Riddle me this, Ken Martin. The information machine the Republicans have created, not just with Fox and OAN and Newsmax, not just with the rural radio stations and the rural newspapers, but clearly the way that they controlled and commanded CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the AP, Huffington Post, the way they commanded all of them tells you you're already on the outside looking in. And they are willing to go out and blow $44 billion on a social media website just to create a website, a social media site that can be used as a weapon. And right now, you guys the Democrats don't really even support the handful of progressive media that's out there. So I don't know what you do to counter this. Outside of, you shouldn't have to have a pandemic for the Democratic Party to look appetizing. How about we say it like that? And it shouldn't be that way. Better wages, health care for everybody, better quality of life, good schools. This is not exactly the tyranny that it is portrayed as. So how you're going to do that, and my guess would be I would be in touch with Generation Z and people that understand social media, because the reality is that the future way we message ourselves with news and information isn't even out there. It might just be a little bit of a small speed bump on the horizon at this point. But you need to find that, because I'll point out to something. Back when the Republicans first started doing this media takeover, they basically had their plan in place. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 gave them a lot of power, and they looked like they were on the verge of basically being able to control the message for most of this country. And then came the internet, and they could not counterpoint that one until 2016, where they started realizing they could, infiltrate and troll farm this. And then in 2024, where they literally had one of their, weirdo, creepo, what is up with that dude's head, Elon Musk, buy Twitter and use it as a weapon against the Democrats across the country. So you've got to figure out where the next generation of that information comes from. Because I can tell you right now, no matter how much we look at Threads and Blue Sky and Instagram and TikTok and all these things, in 20 years, we're going to be talking about those like Netscape and MySpace. Okay? So, good luck. Overall, I think you'd be a pretty good head of the Democratic Party. But you got a lot of work to do, man. And you can't just stop trying to apologize for being a Democrat. And not trying to be Republican light either. The party's got a heck of a platform. It's only when the candidates run from that platform you guys fail. 952-946-6205, 952-946-6205. We'll take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show here on your Tuesday. AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota, Matt McNeil Show. The Rackett has this one. This is pretty good stuff. This is kind of terrifying how a guy like Pete Hegseth can actually get into a role here that as the Secretary of Defense. Last week, under the fiery headline, Trump taps bloodthirsty, unqualified Fox News scumbag from Minnesota to lead DOD. I think I'm sensing some bias in their report. Rackett rattled off some of the most glaring negatives surrounding Trump picked to lead the Department of Defense, failed U.S. Senate hopeful Pete Hegseth, who unfortunately is from here. Turns out that list, which included vouching for war criminals, calling for hospital mosque school bombings, and impregnating people who weren't his then wife, wasn't nearly long enough to encapsulate the Forest Lake natives' scummy multitudes. So today, they direct your attention to a new triple byline tally of Hegseth's factoids from Popular Information. By the way, he did spend yesterday denying the 2017 sexual assault allegation while acknowledging that he did issue a payment to the accuser. Here are some of the things that the Rackett initial story failed to include about Pete Hegseth, who once again Donald Trump thinks should be the Secretary of Defense. The 2017 sexual assault allegation. His 2002 argument in a student newspaper that having sex with unconscious women shouldn't be classified as rape. Wow. His serial philandering and blackmail, it could inspire. So, yeah, he could easily be blackmailed by, people that find out about his multitude of discrepancies. His 2019 argument that fellow vets receiving government assistance violates the ethos of service by being dependent on the government, a.k.a. he wants to cut VA benefits to the soldiers who have earned them. Jackass. Ugh. His pro-waterboarding, anti-Geneva Convention positions on the 2016 Conventional Forum, Conservative Forum. His who cares approach to nuclear warfare. This one seems to be a bit of a grave concern considering he's going to be the Secretary of Defense. Who doesn't mind turning the earth into a scorched wasteland? Ha ha, good times. As long as they're unconscious chicks, that's Pete Hegseth. His eye-raising tattoo, he's got a tattoo, the Deus Vult tattoo. This is a tattoo that has been linked to anti-American idealism, and it's red. He insists, this is how much of a weasel Pete Hegseth is. He points to the cross chest on here, and he says, this is the tattoo that I have a problem with. No, it's the one on his arm, which seems to symbolize the 8-8, which is, of course, of Nazi heritage. But, hey, whatever, man. You got that. I might have gone with the butterfly, but you went with that. His membership in a Christian supremacist church, his belief that higher Muslim birth rates represent a slow-motion 9/11, and his promotion of a bestiality-coded opinion piece that called the homosexual lifestyle abnormal and immoral. And he wants to be in charge of the military. This is, by the way, and this just, when it breaks during the show, I don't have enough time to research it. But, I don't really need to research this. And Donald Trump has placed his choice to run Medicaid and Medicare is Dr. Oz. Oh, God. Man, is Hot Santa not available? This reminds me of when John Oliver got the catheter cowboy to try to change people's mind, because this is what Trump is. He sees someone on TV and is like, you know what I want to do with that guy? I'm going to make him in charge of hospitals. Like, no, that's Regis Philbin, sir. No, although has Regis passed away, didn't he? I think he did. At this point, yeah, he did. So it's not Regis. It's Troy Aikman on the NFL broadcast. He's going to be in charge of transportation. No, actually, that's Sean Duffy from The Real World. Oh, for God's sakes. Native Roots Radio is up next. Try to have a good one. We're back on a Wednesday with Stein. Until then, see ya.